This is great to be back. I didn't think I'd be back, maybe ever again, but it's nice to see a few faces I recognize and a lot I don't. That's cool. Wow, making an impact. So just hearing this, I'm going to deviate what I was going to say. I like doing that. When COVID happened, we saw the character of people, all the flaws came out. Things you could hide before all came out. So we devised until today now, 4 years, every year I make a curriculum for 12 months with a character trait that needs to be fixed in God, with Bible verses that we study every week. And we do this every year. But the first year we did it, somebody made a card game for kids to play on character based on our sermon series for a year. And it went to the #1 bookstore in Indonesia, and they marketed it for a year across the country. It's like Barnes & Noble marketing all your sermons from Central for the next year. Why not? Everything is changing. That's what we're going to talk about, this idea. 2 weeks ago, you had someone speak here who's a really good friend of mine, Aichi from Ethiopia. Aichi and some of his friends, we all get together once a year and brainstorm. We've done that for years. And our last time in Ivory Coast, Aichi and his friends looked at me and said, Jim, you don't practice what you teach. You teach what you practice. I'd never heard that before. And I started reminiscing on it, and I said, thank you, God. I don't want to ever be talking about something that I'm not doing. And those guys, they gave me a name. They call me the Apostle James. I know we give names to people, prophet and pastor and stuff. I don't hear a lot of people being called apostle. But today we're going to talk about the apostle heart of Paul that he shares in Romans. This is incredible. In these few verses, Paul is sharing stuff that's kind of seems rudimentary. It seems like repeating, but you're going to see characteristics of that apostolic heart that if you catch that lays a foundation for something to be built that's going to really impact a whole area. You can be a community that really impacts the world, that changes the world. So that's what I'm calling what we're talking today from Romans 15. I've really never thought about preaching on this section until Tim asked me, and I thought, this is really cool. The values of world-changing communities. And the first one comes out of verse 4. I'm going to just read verse 14. I myself am convinced, my brothers, that you yourselves are full of goodness, complete in knowledge, and competent to instruct one another. Paul reminds them, hey guys, you got everything that you need to serve others. You're not lacking in anything. He says you're full of goodness. Doesn't mean you're perfect. It means your heart is in the right place. He says you're complete in knowledge. Doesn't mean you know it all. It means you're mature in understanding what you know. God's not looking for people who have a great knowledge, because knowledge often we understand and know makes us proud. He's not looking for people who have a great tradition, because tradition makes us tired. He's looking for those who want new life and how to release it. When we moved to the city from the jungle, we were next to a military compound where soldiers and their families retire and have a whole complex. And one young man we started reaching out to there, Demetrius, or we called him Demi. Demi's dad was pretty violent. He'd beat his mom every single day. His mom would get broken bones, go into the hospital, get out, get well, get beaten again, go back to the hospital. Finally, one night when Demi was 12 years old, he took a machete, went into the room where his dad was sleeping, and was going to slit the throat of his dad. At the last minute, God held his hand, and he didn't do it. The next day, his dad went off to the military compound and came back in the afternoon, and in front of the house, he fell down to the ground and died on the spot. They don't know if it was a heart attack or a stroke, but he was dead. Demi had all these wounds that he had from seeing his mother battered her whole life. And he went on a path of rebellion, became the town criminal, the top criminal in our city, with a gang, in jail, out of jail, in jail, out of jail. His siblings all came to faith. They witnessed to Demi. His mom came to faith in our church. They all witnessed, but Demi didn't want to hear it. They said, Demi is beyond grace. He's too wicked. Then one night he was drinking with his buddies, and he got pressure in his chest. He fell down to the ground, and they rushed him emergency to the hospital. And en route to the hospital, he cried out, God, save me. If I don't die, I'll give my life to you. And God gave Demi a second chance. He didn't die. And he gave his life to Jesus. The next day, I put a Bible in his hands. I said, Demi, I don't want you to go in any services, church services. I don't want you to go to any discipleship classes. I want to show you how to read and ask questions of the Bible. And whatever you hear God say to you, you do it and do it quickly. Discovery Bible study. And he did this every day. He's learning stuff. Every day he is obeying. Every day he's growing because he obeyed quickly. He became our top leader in just a matter of months. He's now one of our missionaries sent to another island and is serving God there. But one day, Demi came to me, and he said, Jim, I just realized something from God. If I hear God speak to me through the Word, I have to obey within 48 hours. If I don't obey within 48 hours, I lose that truth. I thought about it. That's true. So it became the 48-hour rule in our ministry. Across the country in our network, everybody knows the 48-hour rule. If God speaks to you, you have 48 hours to obey. If you don't obey within 48 hours, you'll lose it. And that makes people start doing stuff really quickly and changing really quickly. In movements around the world, everybody ministers to everybody. No ministry is top down, it's all horizontal. I disciple you, you disciple me. Someone came to our church in Papua, a Korean pastor, went to do a PhD study from Korea on our church, because we're the biggest church in our region. And this guy came and he did several months of interviewing people, interviewing me, and he produced this thesis for his PhD, and it was all based on church growth theory. That says for every 100 members of your church, you must have one paid professional staff. Well, we have 1,000 kids in our church, like today, a gathering. We have 1,000 in a big gathering. We have another 1,000 that are not in the big gathering, so 2,000. And we only have one person getting a little bit of money for it, one staff. So after he did this PhD study, he brought it and he says, I want you to know what my final analysis is. There is no reason to explain why you're growing like you are. And I said, thank you. That confirms we're on the right track. During COVID, most of the churches in Indonesia lost 30% of their congregations. Mega churches lost 60%. In our church, we tripled during COVID. Because you can't get together, it doesn't matter, because everybody's in small groups where their lives are being changed. And so they just found in creative ways to meet 1, 2, wherever they can, across a fence, talking to each other, whatever. And it kept growing and growing, tripled until we had 30 new pastors. I ordained 30 new pastors during COVID. I didn't know any of them. And they're all women, who were being discipled, then discipled somebody else in a group. They started another group. That's called pastoring. Pastors is a function, not an office. And so we all came together, and I did an ordination prayer over all these women. So cool. Whole point is everybody's serving everybody. That's movement thinking. The second thing, verses 17 through 22, but I think I'll just read maybe from 19, in the middle of 19. So from Jerusalem all the way to Illyricum, I fully proclaim the gospel of Christ. It's always been my ambition to preach the gospel where Christ is not known, so that I would not be building on someone else's foundation. Rather, it's written, those who were not told about him will see, and those who have not heard will understand. That's why I have often been hindered from coming back to you to visit. So he's saying this pioneering spirit. I'm always looking for new places. That's Paul's heart. That's the apostolic heart, that communities of people of faith can change their world with that spirit. He's trying to explain to the Romans, hey guys, this is why I can't get back to visit you, because I'm always wanting to be out there trying something new. When Joan and I married, and there's a few people who will remember, we got married, we were young and naive. I was 24, she's 23. But we got married for mission. We got married because we wanted to do mission together. And it made us say, we're going to get married and leave quickly. Not going to wait. In the first year, we're gone. And we had a church here that backed us up in that calling. But why Papua? Like lots of young people, maybe 1 month, we're going to China. Next month, you want to go to India. Next month, you want to go to South America. But something that grabbed our hearts were these unreached tribal people in the middle of the jungle that have never been discovered, that if somebody doesn't go find them, they're never going to hear. And in 1977, the largest group of unreached people was Irian Jaya, or Papua as it's called today. So that's why we went there, because there are people time has forgotten, that if someone doesn't go find them, they're not going to hear. Our motto, we had a motto when we got married. We want to do those things that nobody else wants to do or can do. If somebody else can do it, let them do it. I want to do that stuff that nobody else wants to or can. When we got to Papua, we said, well, where are there missionaries not wanting to go? Lots want to go to the highlands. They can have gardens and food. People don't want to go to the southern lowlands where it's swamp, where it's mosquito infested, where it's malaria ridden. Nobody wants to go there. Okay, that's where we want to go. That was our spirit. Not looking at the trends, not looking at the fads and following those. What is in your city, in your nation, in your country, in your world that is not getting a touch from God? Where is something not happening in San Jose, in the Bay Area, in America? Don't ask, oh, what can we at Central, what can we give to our city? Wrong question, wrong starting point. You ask, what does our city need? If you ask what do we have to give, that's limiting God. You ask, what does our city need? And then you bring your city into those needs. And every city is going to be different. You bring a city into those needs, and you say, I don't have the resources for this. That's fine. God has it. And He will equip you to meet those needs. But you have to start with the heart. When we got to the jungle, a lot of you know the first day we arrived in the middle of the jungle, there was a tribal war. And after the war is over, people are shot with bows and arrows everywhere. People are killed. And they take us to our hut, and we go up into a hut. And they start bringing all the wounded people, laying them on the floor in the hut. Kind of like they wanted us to do something for the wounded. And we had no medical training at that time. But Joan had a heart to always try to do what needed to be done. So one guy named Aro, he had started the war that day. He'd gotten hit in the skull with a stone axe, and his scalp was parted back. You could see the white of his skull bleeding. And we thought he was dead, but Joan knelt down, got a rag, wiped the blood off his head, took a roll of tape and kind of brought the scalp together and tried to tape it together, and we prayed over him. That was her first operation. And she learned from there every day on reading books, on the two-way radio with doctors talking, trying to learn how to do all this stuff because it was a need. Paul paints a picture here. Paints a picture, he says, from Jerusalem to Illyricum, I always pronounce that wrong. In modern terms, that's Jerusalem to Yugoslavia. Paul says, I finished off this place, I'm going someplace new. How many churches did Paul have in those areas? 12. He's saying, I finished off this whole region. He's still got 12 churches. How can he be so proud to say he's done it all with just 12 churches? Because of the kind of churches he planted. If you investigate this, you'll see he had one here, one here. They're strategic, and they've got the DNA put into them, and they're multiplying And they're impacting, and radius is going to go more and more and more, and you can actually see it is true. He did make it everywhere. He touched everywhere. Because of the kind of apostolic churches he was planting. Everybody serving everybody. Everybody looking for the new place where something's not being done. We made, in January, our network in the country, we made a goal, 100 cities in the next 10 years. We want to reach 100 major cities in Indonesia in 10 years. And now, it's now going the first day of September, we've got 8. 8 that have been reached. And I really believe something is happening because you're believing God where maybe other people don't believe. Most churches are receiving, and when I say our church is thriving, we're not a church that receives people from other churches. That's not growth for us. In fact, twice a year, I have to stand up in front and I say this. Hey, everybody here today, you like being around all these problem young people that are getting their lives put back together around us. But if you're not here to obey, we invite you today, please leave our church. We want only people that want to hear and obey. And people leave. But it sure makes us all one goal, one heart, one mind. We're here to hear and obey. 2 times, 2 major networks, television networks in Indonesia have come and done documentaries on our work. And they'll interview the kids as they're going out. And they say, why are you part of this? And every single young person answers the same. Because this is the place where I learned to hear God speak and obey, do what he tells me. If all the churches in San Jose every week were like that, we're here because this is where we hear God speak and we do it. You turn this place upside down. Movements are happening because that pining spirit of want to obey quickly. Now, freely been given, freely give it away. Verses 23 through 29, but I'll just read 20, maybe 25. He says, now, however, I'm on my way to Jerusalem in service of the saints there, for Macedonia and Achaia have pleased to make a contribution to the poor amongst the saints in Jerusalem. And then he says, and the Gentiles are giving back to the Jews who brought the gospel to them. So he's saying, hey guys, you've freely been given, and now you're giving it away. They had all things in common, the early church. A group had a need, someone in the group had a need, the others met that need. They didn't wait for a fundraising committee meeting or a fundraising department. And after the Gentiles received new life, because the Jews bringing the good news to them, now it's their chance to get something back. And they readily did it. A few years earlier, there had been a famine in Jerusalem, and the Jewish believers, they were highly impacted, and Paul uses this opportunity for the Gentiles to give to those guys who are in need now. And they do it. I want you to catch the principle from this. Freely you've been given, freely give it away. Missions today is no longer west to east. It's not east to west. It's everywhere to everywhere. Everybody giving to everybody. You remember a few years ago there was a bombing in Beirut, Lebanon, in the harbor. We have a team, I've gone there several times and trained. And yeah, the bomb hit the glass in their apartment, smashed in, but they were all okay. But because we're mostly working at the University of Beirut and some others there, how can we link this to where people in Indonesia, young people in Indonesia can feel a heart for young people in Beirut? So all across Indonesia, our young people had coffee shops where they'd have, or schoolrooms, or doing these little events, bringing some bands, singing some music, and doing fundraising for Beirut. And it was called the Love Beirut Project. And they're going all around the country because young people in one country want to be one heart with young people in another country. It was so incredible. And they raised this money and they sent it. And I'll never forget these young people in Beirut, Lebanon, who have lost everything. And the country is devastated. And they're mostly Muslim, receiving this money from Indonesia. And they were so heartfelt, and they were crying and weeping, and they had a video gathering, and we were all watching together as they were saying thank you. That's the world we live in today. Mission is we had organizations doing mission, and then we had networks, but networks get really big and they become organizations. And now we need to get back to networking that's small and fat and can move quickly. And there'll be a church in San Jose, networking with a church in Beirut, with a church in Indonesia. Just 3, saying, this is our commonality. We're all the same. We're all going the same direction. We have the same values. And we're the global church now. We're no longer a church in San Jose. We're a global church. And we're making an impact. There's no more mission trips where we go and help those poor people. It might be them coming here like an Aichi from Ethiopia to give something from there to this place. It's everywhere to everywhere. Freely we've been given, freely give it away. And then the last one, verse 30 through 33, and maybe I'll just read, I start 30. I urge you, brothers, by the Lord and by the love of the Spirit, to join me in my struggle by praying to God for me. Pray that I may be rescued from the unbelievers in Judea, and that my service in Jerusalem may be acceptable to the saints there, so that by God's will I will come to you with joy, and together with you be refreshed. What Paul is saying there, hey guys, pray for me because I'm worried I'm going to lose the cutting edge. Pray for me that I still keep that risk-taking spirit. When the tsunami happened in Aceh almost 20 years ago, we were there, and there was a missionary couple that I'd known. They'd been in Indonesia for years and then gone back to America. But the tsunami happened, and they came back. And they were with us at the tsunami relief efforts. And they said to me, Jim, when we went back to America, we lost the cutting edge. And we came to Aceh in the relief efforts because we want to get the cutting edge back. Keep on doing those things that if God isn't in it, it can't succeed. Paul knows it's dangerous for him to go back to Jerusalem. He keeps pushing. He doesn't want to take any easy way out. He knows people have told him, hey, if you go back there, they're going to imprison you, they're going to attack you, all kinds of bad things. And even though he knows it's dangerous, he does it anyway. Because danger is normal. There's no place on the face of this earth that is free from danger. It can happen anytime, unexpectedly. So be prepared. Danger is normal. Like when we went to the jungle, a lot of you know, there was a gift waiting for me in the jungle of Papua. It was called malaria. If you come to our area of the world, you will get that gift. And it's the worst malaria in the world. The U.S. Navy has done studies around the world, and it's the worst malaria in the entire world. Always mutating, always different. And known medicines don't help. And so I got malaria after 2 weeks. Got malaria, not easy malaria, malaria that makes your bones breaking and you're convulsing on the floor and vomiting, and had to be a float plane come into the jungle and take me out to recover, and then come back again to the jungle. Next month, malaria again. Every month, malaria, malaria, malaria. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, malaria. I said, God, I don't understand this. Have you given me the spiritual gift of being sick? Because in America, I did not have a theology of suffering. I had a theology of prosperity. And it was in Papua I had to learn a theology of suffering that says, I believe God is the healing God, and I will always pray for healing. But there are times when God delays his healing for a more glorious purpose, to where in the midst of suffering, we can show Jesus to the watching world. And it was after the 3rd year, we had a big movement when 80% of our tribe came to faith. And a few years after that, I'm sitting in a hut, cooking over sago on a fire, and one of the men says, Jim, do you remember when you were so sick in those early days? Yeah, I remember, can't forget. We'd see you get sick and be flown out on the plane, and we thought, you'd never come back. But you came back. You got sick, flown out, we thought, he'll never come back. But you came back. That began to say to us, you had something so important, we'd better listen to it. You catch this? God will use suffering in my life as preparation for the gospel in their lives. And if I can do that so that a tribe can come to Jesus, why not? Now, it's one thing when you're sick. It's another thing when your children are sick, yeah? You want to take that onto yourself. You don't want them to suffer. I have 3 daughters, all born and raised in the jungle, and they had malaria hundreds of times. 2 almost died in a coma for a week. No medicines helping, just we're praying over them, wondering if this is the time God's going to call. And at the end, God gave them back to us. But that's not easy. I even had missionaries telling me, Jim, you're not responsible. You need to take better care of your family. You need to go back to your homeland. It's too dangerous there. And I came to it one day in prayer. I said, God, I believe your calling on us is still to be here. And as a responsible husband and father, I'm doing everything I can for my family. I have to believe that you're going to make up for my lack. And I got peace that passes all understanding that day. I knew that God will always make up for my lack. And my kids love that they grew up in the jungle. They wouldn't have ever traded it. They feel like they're the richest kids in the world. All this is to say, there's no breakthroughs without risk-taking. Went to the Syrian refugee camps 10 years ago, started going, went 8 years going back and back over and over, getting Indonesians in there. And probably at that point, there's no one more lost everything in the world today than the Syrian refugees. 1/4 of the population ran and probably will never get back. With bombs coming over the border to Jordan, with bombs dropping by their sides as they're running. But I'd be in those tents with them, with 2 sisters and 9 children, and one husband's alive, one husband's dead, and they're just trying to figure how we're going to make it. And I would sit and I'd say, let me tell you some things about somebody who cares for you. Yes, let's call all the family, we want to hear. Yeah, is it dangerous? Yeah, it was Syria is probably one of the most dangerous places at that time. But they were the most open people I've ever seen in the world in my whole lifetime. All that is to say, movements are happening in the most dangerous places in the world. And you can be part of that. You can be connecting. We're a global church now, where everybody serves everybody, where we have this pioneering spirit that's planted, where freely we give it away, and risk-taking is what we're about. We're never going to stop risk-taking. I want us to pray. Father God,